Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nicholas Sameta, Chair of the Statutory Public Meeting. Before I begin, I would like to provide you with a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the council chambers using the nearest exit staircase. If you require assistance, please seek our clerk's office for further assistance. And I ask that you please gather outside of City Hall in the Farmers Market parking lot and await further instructions. As a reminder, City of Cambridge Council meetings are broadcasted on the City of Cambridge YouTube page and archived on the city's website. At that note, we had 90 views on YouTube and no delegations during our last statutory public meeting. Please note that we have rules of engagement at council and committee meetings. I ask that you be respectful while others are speaking, refrain from any demonstrations, and I encourage you to actively listen to others. We have 2 statutory public meetings this evening. It is my pleasure to introduce Council, Councillor Hamilton, Mayor Leggett, Councillor Kimpson, Councillor Roberts, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Schwery, Councillor Earnshaw, and Councillor Devine. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank everyone for joining us for this meeting. We appreciate your participation. As we come together to serve the community, I ask that we create a welcoming and positive environment for everyone that includes respect, that we listen to each other with care, speak thoughtfully, and engage kindly with one another. Kindness, that we treat everyone, council staff and the public, with respect and understanding, and inclusion, that we embrace diverse perspectives and respect each other's opinions. Together we can make this meeting one where respect, kindness, and inclusion are at the heart of everything we do, that this is a safe space. Behavior that is disrespectful, disruptive, aggressive, or intimidating or result in those individuals being asked to leave. A reminder to members of council that the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act requires members of council to declare any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to a matter under consideration. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, members of council? Seeing none, we will move forward with the agenda. We will begin with our public meetings for any pre-registered delegates, followed by any non-registered delegates for both our in-person and virtual audience members that wish to speak. Members of our virtual audience wishing to speak to any of the items before us can contact us at clerks@cambridge.ca to be called into the meeting, or text the number 226-218-1184. If you are interested in delegating this evening from home, I would ask that you contact staff now. City staff are on hand to monitor this number and email address during the course of the statutory public meeting. Please note that the number is also available on the city website, our agenda, and on the live stream of our meeting located on the City of Cambridge YouTube page. Each delegate who participates will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. I remind members of council and the public that there is no debate of the item in the public meeting. I will then call upon the appropriate party to provide a presentation. I also remind council that these public meeting items will be before council a second time. This process is for public consultation. Council will consider all oral and written comments prior to making a decision on the matter. We will now move forward to the delegation portion of the agenda, where all registered delegates may speak to matters on tonight's agenda. To be respectful and mindful of everyone's time, we will hear from all pre-registered delegates first. Delegates will be heard for all public meetings in the order that they were received. We have 2 pre-registered delegations. Once pre-registered delegates are complete, I will prompt any in-person audience members who wish to speak to make their way up to the podium, and please state your name before your delegation. As a reminder to the virtual audience, please text 226-218-1184 or email clerks@cambridge.ca to coordinate your appearance. Our first in-person delegation is Larry Mascio, Waterloo Region Home Builders Association, RE Parks, Parks DC. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you. Okay, my name, as you say, is Larry Massio, and I serve as the policy advisor to the Waterloo Region Homebuilders Association. Chair Ermetta and members of committee, I'm here this evening to speak to the Parks and Recreation Development Charges Update Study and Bylaw. We only became aware of this matter last Tuesday, so we haven't had the opportunity to review individual projects in any detail. However, that hasn't been our primary focus. Rather, we're here this evening to speak to the bigger picture and ask for both your understanding and help to address the current affordability crisis. As I know you're aware, there is an ongoing affordability crisis in Ontario, including within the City of Cambridge. This crisis has evolved largely over the last 2 decades or so and has roots in a provincial policy which has constrained land supply, aggressive federal immigration targets, a stimulative interest rate policy, and more recently, global supply constraints. We now find ourselves in a situation where these external pressures have seriously impacted the new housing industry. Land values, building materials, and development inputs have all escalated at a rate that eclipses many of the other sectors of the economy. On top of that, we are now facing a considerable economic and employment uncertainty given the status of trade negotiations with the United States. This has all resulted in a precipitous decline in housing affordability, as well as a general decline in consumer confidence. New home sales, building permits, and residential construction have all declined over the past year, and the home building industry is struggling, but still limping along. However, given the economic headwinds we're now facing, we anticipate a further pullback this year unless we can address the affordability situation. Housing starts are a trailing economic indicator, where current residential construction activity is primarily related to sale transactions that occurred over the past months and sometimes even years. With the continued decline in new home sales, we anticipate a further decline in new residential construction activity over the coming year. Our association recognizes the challenges the City of Cambridge faces in dealing with these external pressures as well, particularly with respect to financing required infrastructure in community facilities. However, we're here this evening to request your understanding and consideration of these serious economic headwinds when addressing changes to the development charges bylaw. We feel that the overarching objective should be a development charge policy that is cognizant of the unprecedented affordability crisis we find ourselves in and will likely remain for the foreseeable future. There is a direct relationship between the development charge policy and housing affordability. Since development charges are fully reflected in new rentals and home prices, any increase or reduction in development charges can be directly passed on to the new consumer. Other Ontario municipalities are starting to recognize this link and to varying degrees are finding ways to reduce those charges, even if temporarily. In particular, 3 recent examples come to mind. Mississauga, for instance, has reduced development charges until November 2026 by 50% across the board and eliminated them altogether for purpose-built rental units with 3 or more bedrooms. Vaughan has reset its development charges to 2018 levels, reducing the rate by almost 50% until 2029. Hamilton has reduced its development charge rates by 20% for a 2-year period. We are asking the City of Cambridge to join these other leading municipalities and seriously consider what it can do. Any reduction, however small, can send the right message and help address the current housing affordability crisis. Our association would like to request that City Council pause the implementation of the recommended Parks and Recreation increase, while moving forward with important changes relating to Bills 17 and 60 makes sense at this time, adding significant costs to the Parks and Recreation development charge may not. The staff recommendation before you this evening includes substantial increases to this service category. The gross capital cost of the proposed new parks and recreation projects is $191.6 million, representing a 29% increase over the 2023 gross capital cost. The DC recoverable cost for the proposed parks and recreation projects is $129.3 million, representing a 38% increase over the 2023 background study. If council includes all of the parks and recreations projects identified in the background study, the charge will increase substantially.
Hello? Sorry, I would need you to summarize, just to wrap up.
So what we're requesting this evening is that you show some leadership and understanding. And we request that first, you update the Parks and Recreational Development Charge, or you pause the update of the Parks and Recreation Development Charge for a period of 1 year with a commitment to conduct further review at the time to determine whether broader economic conditions are yet in place to support the increase. Second, in context of the 2026 capital budget discussions, we ask that you focus on and prioritize the projects and expenditures that relate to the basic infrastructure required to advance new housing, those being roads, sanitary, and water. We see these measures, if accepted by the City of Cambridge, as providing a significant help to our struggling industry. More importantly, however, it will show leadership from the City of Cambridge Council that will hopefully encourage other Waterloo Region and Ontario municipalities to follow suit. So with that, I just want to reiterate that we're not asking for council to remove these community infrastructure items. We're simply asking for a temporary pause that recognizes the affordability crisis we're in. And with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions, should there be any.
Thank you. I'm just going to check if we have any questions. Do we have any questions, members of council? Councillor Swery.
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and thank you, Larry, for coming and presenting.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I do support what you said. And were you ever contacted by the city prior, like during this, or like you said, it was the first time you heard of it?
Well, it was the first time I heard of it, and many people within my organization. We received an email from staff last, I think it was Tuesday, which we responded to, so.
And if I could follow up, please? Thank you. Because I'm looking at these, just the development charges, they're pretty high. And I'm wondering, like, I'm seeing like 46,000 per single. So all of those costs will make homes more unaffordable. And I'm just wondering how you will deal with it if perhaps, you know, the development charges increase. However, the cost of homes are dropping because people can't afford it. Would it make it that some builders may go out of business?
So the
Can't make up their cost?
right, housing prices reflect the cost of building the home, and that includes the process, the building materials, the time of the various people involved in the process. A development charge is a tack-on tax at the end. So any reduction in a municipal development charge can be directly put back to the end user. So it's not part of the overall cost of the dwelling unit being constructed and transferred.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any, but I do have a question, and I do thank you for coming in. My question and my concern is the impact on the property taxes. So my question would be, what advice do you have to the city to make up those costs or to find savings or whatever we have to do? Because I'm concerned about the additional weight on the residents of the community who could see their property taxes go up in the future. That is a concern. So how do we deal with that?
Well, frankly, Chair Mehta, I don't see that as being your issue. The City of Cambridge has many existing facilities and parks within the municipality, which are already there. They do serve the residents of Cambridge quite well, I believe. Could you add additional facilities? Sure. But your tax revenue already covers the cost of those facilities. The new facilities that we're talking about that would be funded through development charges are not there yet. So until you build them, you don't incur any costs associated with staffing them or maintaining them. So all we're asking is a simple pause, given the broader economic realities that we're dealing with. And over that time, we'll understand whether we need additional help at the end of that period to help with affordability and help with the home building industry as a whole, or whether things have gotten better, in which case time is ripe to start to implement this increase.
So thank you for that answer. There is another question, Councillor Swery.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a question because I remember, I think it was back in the 80s, not to age myself, but so if a home price drops, like say you started to build it, but the home prices dropped, say 300,000, is it possible that some developers will, I already know that some aren't making money, but could that cause them to like walk away from the job or even bankruptcy?
That's a really difficult question, Councillor Schwery, because every single developer has a different economic pro forma for its projects. Every single project has a different land valuation, different cost of acquisition. So there's really no easy answer to that. All I can say is that the industry is doing its utmost to do what it can to reduce its costs to lower the price of housing so that we can meet the market. We're simply asking the Cambridge City Council to do the same with respect to development charges.
Thanks.
Councillor Cooper?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure if I can do this right now, so I'm going to be asking him. Am I able to ask a question of staff right now? Or does that come after?
We will have questions for staff afterwards. I would recommend that we wait until after.
Okay.
I don't see any further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Our next delegation is Bob Starr, Galt Core Heritage Conservation District Plan and Guidelines. Welcome, Bob. And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. My first council meeting, I'm sorry if my decorum is a little bit rusty. I'll do my best. After that, my item will be rather mundane, I think. I live over at 18 Main Street, right on across from Local 13. I've been here for about 5 to 6 years now, and I love living downtown. It's awesome. And all the historic stuff that you guys are working on is fantastic. It's been just a pleasure to watch things build up and people come back in and businesses come back over the time I've been here. So thank you for that. And everything I want to bring up is more of just considerations for going forward and what's going to happen in this sort of district area and whatnot. My issue is very simple. It's a parking lot, the Dixon Street parking lot specifically. It is probably one of the most sought after parking lots in this area, and it's completely full of contractors, business people, just all day long. For tenants, that can be a very big challenge. We pay $106 a month for the parking spot back there, and I have to base my routine and schedules around when I can come and go, because in some cases, when I come back, there will not be a spot for me to park in. The market on Saturday is a challenge. I tell people, and I'm like, I can go out, but I will be back at 3 because I know I will not get a spot before I come back there. And I don't want to impede the market at all. It's great, but just some other things there is just there's not enough space for tenants. And after the businesses close at night, all the tenants are still there. And the parking does get better, but just trying to get parking spots throughout the day is very rough. I don't know if there's a solution to this, nor am I looking for a solution tonight. I just wanted to bring it up because that spot particularly is, it's frustrating for tenants that are down there. A couple other things just want to know. The parking pass terminal things that are down there that, to my knowledge, haven't worked since the end of the pandemic, that are just bagged up. Constant confusion for tourists and other people that come into this area. I find myself being community outreach to a lot of people that show up, and I say, those don't work, you got 2 hours parking, and the app that we're supposed to use to get parking, it used to be an app called Flowbird. For some reason that stopped working, and I can't see any information online or anywhere else to know how you pay for parking down there for people that don't live in the area. That's really it. Let me end it there. So again, sorry, thank you for appreciate my newness to this, but that's all I had. So if you have any questions, I'm here. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for speaking. We do have a few questions, or one question anyways. Councillor Cooper?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks for bringing this up. And first of all, you said at the beginning this wouldn't seem important. I'm quite familiar with parking issues downtown in certain areas, and when you're dealing with it, what you're dealing with, it's very important. Okay, I do understand that. I've heard these problems before. Could you just tell us the situation you're in with regards to how these passes are working? I'm assuming you, as a tenant, you're paying to be in the parking lot, and I'm guessing there's no assigned spots. If there's one available, you get it. If there isn't, too bad.
There are not. About a year or so ago, they put up like more permit signs up for like permit only pass, but for a while they worked. Afterwards, people just realized they aren't being monitored at all in most cases, so they just park wherever they want. The parking pass, yes, it's monthly, and I'm fine with the amount. I didn't bring the amount up to criticize that. It's fine. I just wanted to make note that like there is a cost for this. So like if you look at it as a product, it's very frustrating to buy a product and not be able to use it at any given time.
Okay, do you find that I don't know how many tenants you have, but there's people that are paying for this pass that you have, and you say there is a permit spot, or some of them. Is there enough, if they're all open, do all the people that have a permit have a spot to go?
I'm not sure. I don't know how many tenants are using that spot to park in. I've met tenants in the area in other buildings that may have a lot behind where Local 13 is, that larger parking lot by monograms. But I think most of them in my building park in the lot right out back.
If I just have one more, just to continue down this line here, is anybody moderating it? Like if someone's in one of these spots and they don't have a pass, is anything happening? Is anyone calling by law? Is anything happening at all?
I'm not sure what the enforcement is. I've seen people down there kind of randomly at times. I'll just add really quickly, the other frustrating thing is 2 weeks ago, I came home in the afternoon, I could not find a spot, so I had to park on one of the sort of make my own spot at the end of the row. I was going out that evening and I couldn't get back to my car that night, and I got a ticket for, like, because I was not in that proper lot. So the only other thing is that if enforcement's down there, I'd ask that they kind of use a little more logic and say, if I have a pass in my window and I'm not parked in a proper spot, it's probably because there wasn't one available when I came back to park the car.
Okay, thank you. I feel your pain. I have a similar problem in another part of town, so thank you for letting us.
Your parking's communal submit.
Thank you. So we do have another question. Before I get to that question, I'm just going to say like a friendly reminder that this meeting in particular is about a potential heritage district and the design guidelines and, you know, like urban design, things like that. I did want to give you an opportunity if you had anything specific to the heritage component, but if you don't, that's still okay because we have been listening to the concerns that you've raised and we can notify our transportation staff and other staff. And if we can get the answers to your questions at a later date, it's just this meeting is more to do with the planning. So we may not have all the answers for you tonight.
Totally understandable.
But did you have any concerns about the heritage component, or is there, I just want to make sure I'm getting all of your concerns if you have any. And then I'll get to the other question in just a minute because I know Mayor Jan's got a question.
For sure. Yeah, I got the mailer for the meeting tonight about the heritage thing, and I figured I would ride its coattails into this just as a further development is being considered going forward for the heritage part, because there is a lot of stuff going on downtown. So yeah, I kind of weaseled my way into this one, so apologize for that, but I figured I'll go and I'll see what I can say. So.
Thank you, and I've done that in the past before my council days to get on the agenda, so I've been there as well, I've done that. But we are listening to your concerns. That is a valid concern as the area intensifies. Parking is definitely something we're gonna have to have a look at. Mayor Jan, did you have a question?
I saw what you were doing.
about getting it.
Yeah, I've used that before myself, before I was on council. I saw what you were doing. Welcome to downtown, even though it has not been great for you with the parking. We did a parking ticket blitz in the summer. Did you not notice that happening? No? Okay. When you got your ticket, did you connect with the?
I'm working through it with parking right now.
No,
Just
but
waiting for them.
did you go to your court hearing to say what happened to you so that you could have it?
No, I just called.
So
It's
are they
in-
reducing it for you, or?
I don't know. They're hopefully going to call me back tomorrow.
Did you?
I was late on that
When
one.
did you get your ticket?
A week or so ago.
Okay, all right. Staff will definitely take away everything you're saying. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, everyone.
And we'll be in touch. Do we have any additional delegates? Please come up to the podium if you wish to speak and to state your name. And that's for any of the 2 public meetings tonight. If you want to speak to that, you have an opportunity. And we're also just waiting if there's any emails or callers. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we're going to get to the next part of our meeting. A reminder that if anyone is interested in any of the items this evening, you may submit written correspondence on these matters for inclusion in the minutes if you are unable to delegate. And I see no further requests to speak, and I've confirmed that with staff. Our first statutory public meeting is agenda number 5.125-026, PG Galt Corps Heritage Conservation District Planning Guidelines. We do have a presentation from ASI Heritage and staff. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, honorable council members, members of staff. My name is Nick Borchescu. I am the supervisor of Heritage Planning. I am here to present the draft final Galt HCD plan in collaboration with ASI, and I will introduce them momentarily. Tonight's presentation is just going to walk you through the background and the context that led up to having this final HCD plan in front of us, and to offer full explanations and detailed presentation on what the HCD plan is going to be all about, including boundary, policies, guidelines, and other areas that may be affected by the implementation of this HCD plan. So I'm going to try to see if this works. Yes, it does. So first, I'd like to introduce a little bit of background. The project started back in July 2020, as some of you may recall. And in January 2021, the city has hired ASI, and the project is in 2 phases. There's a study component, which went on from January to October of 2021, and it addressed all of the possible implications, effects, various characteristics, anything really affecting the idea of having a heritage district within the boundary of Galt. In October 2021, the study was completed by ASI and presented to council, which was approved and accepted. So the next phase to that was the actual development of the draft plan itself, which was guided by the findings of the study. The plan development went on until January 2023 with a draft presentation, and at that time the project was halted temporarily to review the extent of the boundary and to potentially increase that boundary to include properties that had been considered initially not to be part of the district plan due to their overall characteristics and also the elements that do come together to form a cohesive plan. In May 2025, the project was restarted, and the boundary has modified, it has increased slightly, and this is what we're presenting this evening. So actually, I'm going to get to the ASIT momentarily. I'm going to go to the next slide. This is the process that was followed in order to get to today. So the study, as I mentioned, was concluded in 2021. The draft plan was started in 2022, but then paused in 2023, and the additional properties that were studied at the request of council have been added into the plan boundary to form the current final draft plan for 2025. The overall GALT HCD, as proposed, includes 146 properties, of which 80 are contributing, 50 are non-contributing, and 16 are of the public realm. Moving on, in a little more detail, the HCD study phase, which was throughout 2021, included 2 public meetings, 2 workshops for property owners, 2 community update sessions, an online survey, a presentation to MHAC, and eventually a presentation as a final to City Council. This was, of course, during COVID, so most of the work was done remotely and virtually. As phase 2 started at the end of 2021 and into 2022, an additional 2 more meetings were held, and a third, which will be scheduled for December 8th, coming up shortly, will conclude all of the public input meetings that are provided to the community in order to get as much information as we can to provide a comprehensive and wholesome HCD plan that can not only stand on its own as an element that is to be recognized, respected, and understood, but also to serve for future developments, updates of other existing HCD plans, or implementation of new ones as they may come. So the HCD plan phase that we're in right now also included a community workshop. It included an online survey and the presentation to MHAC, which was scheduled initially for last week, but it has been moved to next week. Finally, there were notices that were sent out to the public to keep the public informed of every step along the way. There was an Engage Waterloo Region page that was set up to discuss the project. The draft and the final of the study were posted online and still are there, and the draft plan has also been posted online for review. The city has put out 495 mailed individual postcards to the residents of the district, the proposed district, and also immediate surroundings. Previous to that, 330 letters have been sent out to residents in the area to advise of the end of the study phase and the findings of that study. And as part of the study, 258 letters were mailed out in 2023 to the residents, informing them of the HCD plan development. In addition to this, the city has also put out newspaper advertisements. The city webpage has been updated multiple times with every phase that has been carried through. And lastly, social media posts were also updated with every step that the team completed. So for today, we are at a public meeting to look at this draft final plan as it stands, and to hopefully present enough information and clarity that City Council will adopt for designation the bylaw for the Gold Core HCD. Meeting notice for this meeting this evening was sent out on November 5th. As I mentioned, postcards were mailed out. Oral representations of the plan are welcome at this meeting, so we've not exactly heard on topic, but we do welcome any information that the public still has to offer at this point. And there is also an online area where information can be submitted, plus heritageinfo@cambridge.ca should anybody want to email us directly. We are accepting information all the way to the middle of December, to the 16th. So anytime until then, any kind of written submission or telephone or email will be more than welcome. I'd like to introduce the members of the team of ASI that have worked so diligently on this project for more than 3.5 years. So we have with us Rebecca Sciarra, Laura Wicked, and also Ute Maya Giambattista, who are going to present the remainder of these slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Chair Mehta and Council, for having us here tonight. We've prepared a presentation to walk through key components of the Heritage Conservation District Plan, a plan that has been in development in downtown Cambridge since 2022. All conservation districts, of which there are hundreds across Ontario, are required to first define their purpose. Each plan is required to clearly state its objectives, describing the conservation vision for the area and the intent of the plan itself. And this is because conservation district objectives are not the same across the board. Instead, they are place-specific. They reflect the results of public engagement that has occurred, the applicable land use planning policies that are particular to a given area, and the heritage values themselves that have been described. So that is where I would like to start tonight in our walkthrough of the Downtown Galt Conservation District Plan. There are a number of objectives in the plan in Section 4, and the recurring theme between them is that this plan has been designed to plan for both preservation and change, balancing heritage protection with anticipated future growth. The primary goal of the plan is to maintain the unique historical character, ambiance, and setting of Galt Core while allowing for thoughtful development that respects its history and celebrates this area that is rich in cultural assets. The plan's primary objective, to steward and enhance the downtown's historic character while it continues to grow, has been many years in the making. As far back as 1981, the city commissioned a comprehensive heritage study that recognized the downtown as a special heritage place. This was reinforced in 1984 when the Main Street Conservation District designation happened, and then in 2005 with the Dixon Hill HCD, and then the various individual heritage designations and listings that have happened since within the boundary. The city renewed this conversation in the early 2000s. The 2008 Heritage Master Plan called out the downtown as a tremendous asset and significant heritage area in Ontario. In 2013, the Downtown Urban Design Guidelines recognized that the 11 properties protected in the Main Street Conservation District captured only a fraction of the downtown's heritage character and features. And it is this pieces of work that have led us to where we are today. An HCD plan has been completed to protect and safeguard this important area in a way that honors its historic context while also embracing change and growth that we know is essential. As Nick mentioned, the city initiated work on the study phase of the Galt Core District in 2021. And that work confirmed that the downtown core meets the criteria for creating a district. The area expresses the city's early industrial and commercial and civic beginnings with a rich collection of 19th and early 20th century architecture, including landmarks like historic churches, civic buildings, commercial streets, bridges, the Grand River itself, and a network of public realm features and networks. Downtown Galt is a well-preserved and unique historical downtown. This area tells of settlement founders and town builders, 19th and early 20th century development patterns and growth, communities of people that settled here, as well as events like the Grand River floods. The area also retains a high degree of design value. It has distinct value in relation to its impressive and unique collection of stone buildings, vernacular architecture, and architect design buildings. Finally, the area is of ongoing social and contextual value. It is considered a landmark with a distinct sense of place. valued by visitors and residents. It is a place of continued social and civic congregation. The area recommended for protection as a conservation district is shown here. It includes the Grand River from Concession Street up to Park Hill Road, and then funnels out from the banks of the river to include a collection of commercial, industrial, institutional, and civic buildings and streetscapes. The boundary of the district doesn't only contain buildings that were constructed here, but in fact includes a rich network of historical and contemporary public realm features. These create the backbone of the district, structuring human experiences of it. These features continue to be contemporary anchors in the area. Some are linear riverside features like Millrace Park and Founders Point. Centennial Park is another feature at the eastern edge that serves as an important gateway into the district. Other public realm features involve the lively open spaces such as Market Square and Civic Square, places created by the interplay between important institutional buildings and open spaces that surround them. Less formal features, such as historical circulation routes, today create pedestrian connections through the downtown. Overlaid onto this network of public realm features are a range of buildings that have been defined as expressing the cultural heritage values of the Galt Core District. These are shown here in green and consist of a range of different building types, from churches, former industrial buildings, a handful of workers' cottages associated with the area's industrial beginnings, commercial buildings, and civic-related institutional buildings. You will see they are dispersed across this area, again clustering along the river from Park Hill Road to Concession Street, and then funneling out from its banks up to Centennial Park. The plan refers to these as contributing properties. And as is the case in any conservation district, there are always buildings or properties within the boundary that are not special or expressive of the area's heritage character. These are shown in gray on this map, and these are classified as non-contributing properties. It's expected that districts in downtowns in Ontario will have non-contributing properties, and their very existence does not mean that this area is any less significant. Rather, these sites can be considered sites ideal for redevelopment undertaken in a way that is sensitive to the area's context. To summarize, the proposed boundary of the Galt Core District is shown here, bounded in blue, and contains a rich collection of public realm features and contributing properties that together have been determined to meet the required criteria for designation as a conservation district under the Ontario Heritage Act. The areas shown on this map in yellow have been recommended to be added to the boundary, and this work has occurred over the past year based on further research and analysis that was initiated following feedback received in 2023. At that time, the team received feedback following an open house that it was important to consider whether the boundary should include features at the edges of the then proposed boundary, such as Centennial Park on the east and/or the Cambridge Mill to the north. The project team researched and assessed these areas in yellow over the past year and concluded that they merit inclusion in the boundary. Inclusion of these properties, as the area north of Park Hill Road and Water Street intersection and Centennial Park had always been recommended by the consultant team as meriting further assessment, a conversation that was had during the study phase back in 2021. And this came out of the historical research, analysis, and public consultation that occurred at that time. So the boundary shown here has been a long time coming, and various iterations of it have been assessed since 2021. With this understanding of the district's boundary, its significance, and what we are trying to accomplish with it, I will now walk through some sample policies and guidelines that are presented in the plan. Part C of the plan presents policies and guidelines for a range of different types of resources within the boundary. there are policies and guidelines for contributing properties, non-contributing properties, parks and public realm features, as well as archaeological resources. So within the plan, you see quite distinctly policies versus guidelines, and they are different. And these differences are important for both staff, council, the public, and property owners to understand. Policy is mandatory. Policies set the official direction for conservation and are legally binding under the Ontario Heritage Act. Guidelines are discretionary. They provide practical advice for property owners and designers, encouraging good design that respects the district's character. And the words associated with each differ. Policies use words like shall, guidelines use words like encourage. Policies set the requirements, while guidelines present best practice. I'll now walk through a concrete example from the plan of policies and guidelines to try to tease apart some of the differences and to also demonstrate that the plan is emphasizing conservation in a context of change. For example, in Chapter 6 of the plan, there are policies for contributing properties. The plan recognizes that buildings on contributing properties are expected to evolve through the introduction of additions, for example. Heritage buildings are not expected to be frozen in time, never to be intervened with. However, when additions are undertaken, they should be sensitive to the context of the district, and this is what the plan is looking to achieve. The plan does not prescribe what the addition must look like to a T, stifling creativity or innovation. Instead, through its accompanying guideline, the plan clarifies that new additions should not replicate historical styles, and rather contemporary design may be in fact appropriate, so long as the heritage building's finishes, architectural elements, and materiality provide an anchor and inspiration for detailing of the alteration or the addition. A similar policy in Chapter 6 of the plan works in a similar way. The policy, the mandatory piece, directs that property owners use materials that are physically and visually compatible with the contributing property when designing new additions or alterations. The policy, though, does not require use of specific materials. Rather, the guidelines clarify that a range of material choices might be appropriate. The plan does not narrowly define that additions must all be in stone or matching existing. Instead, the guidelines recognize that materials, even such as glass, metal, or concrete, when done well, may be appropriate for secondary structures of an exterior wall, for example. Chapter 7 of the plan provides various policies for all those properties I described as non-contributing earlier. These are properties that are potentially vacant or maybe parking lots or with buildings that are not expressive or characteristic of the district's historical character. And again, the policies that are presented in this chapter direct that new development on these kinds of properties should be visually and physically compatible with aspects such as scale and massing of nearby heritage buildings or those forming historic street walls. Within the plan, there is not a prescriptive itemization of what new development should precisely look like, but presents key principles of being visually and physically compatible, and further interprets how to do that with accompanying guidelines. So for example, here, the associated guideline gives an example of how visual and physical compatibility can be achieved, such as a new development occupying the majority of the street frontage and creating or maintaining a continuous street wall. Similarly, within the plan, text guidelines are presented, but also are visual guidelines. So for example, the plan features explanatory diagrams like this one, showing the key design guidelines that should shape new development. This diagram explains how to achieve visual and physical compatibility through treatments or strategies such as aligning cornice heights, maintaining consistent setbacks, repeating existing glazing patterns as those that exist amongst neighboring heritage buildings, stepping back height, when above the historic street wall, and ensuring that new vertical divisions, for example, between building bays, build on the existing vertical rhythms that are already there in the surrounding historical buildings. The goal here is to guide new development so that it fits with the area's historic context while allowing for creativity and modern design approaches. Chapter 10 of the plan presents policies and guidelines for parks and public realm features. And again, the policy framework presented is not highly prescriptive, as the specific treatments that would be appropriate in any one of the parks or public realm areas will vary depending on the specific asset. Therefore, the policy directs, for example, that new developments within or impacting these sites should be compatible with them, including visual experiences of these sites. And finally, creation of the district and the plan itself enables a process for when heritage permits may be required. The plan establishes that the most major changes within the district, things like demolition of contributing buildings, construction, removal, or major additions would require a major heritage permit. However, in various instances, only minor heritage permits may be required. For example, when replacing materials on a contributing property with different materials, and in other instances, no permits at all would be required, such as when repairs are being undertaken using similar or matching materials. Where interventions are considered, staff are available for consultation to confirm permitting requirements. For minor heritage permits, the city has enabled delegated authority to staff to approve such permits, and there is no cost for heritage permits. In 2023, a draft HCD plan was released and has been available online since then. This plan document was updated this past fall to include the revised boundary that I discussed and to also refine some of the content from the earlier draft version that has been available since 2023. In many respects, the plan that is before you is very similar in terms of policies and guidelines as the one that was available since 2023. Should council make a decision to pass a designation bylaw and adopt the plan, the bylaw would then be registered on title on the properties within the boundary. Following, the city would amend any other existing bylaws or official plan provisions so there is conformity with the HCD plan. From there, implementation of the HCD plan moves forward if and when any appeals that come forward are resolved. Some key strategies for initial implementation can include property owner workshops hosted by staff regarding how to use the plan document, Q&A sessions about heritage permits, and/or workshops and mailing lists designed to share information with respect to grant deadlines or other incentives that may be available to property owners within the district. To wrap up, there are a number of other engagement events coming up in the coming weeks. On December 4th, the project team will be meeting with the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee to provide a project update and to answer any questions about the updated draft HCD plan. On December 8th, the project team will be hosting a drop-in open house to share project updates, information about the plan, to answer questions, and to receive any questions or feedback about the plan contents. From there, the project team expects to bring a final HCD plan to council in the spring for purposes of making a decision about whether to proceed or not to prepare a designating bylaw and adopt an HCD plan for the Galt Core. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, members of council? Councillor Earnshaw.
Yes, thank you, Chair Armetta, and thank you very much for your presentation. I noticed you mentioned that Section 4 of the plan is designed to balance heritage protection with future growth, and we councillors have received correspondence that suggests that the implementation of an HCD in downtown Galt would be a disincentive to development and revitalization of the core. And so I'm wondering if you could just elaborate on that a little bit. It seems to be a concern that the public has identified, and I'm wondering how you would respond to that concern.
Sure, thank you. So I think the correspondence and comment that you're referring to is one I hear in many places when doing this work, that there's a sense that a district can seek to freeze an area in time, and maybe decades ago or in some other places of the province, that may have been an approach. But here there has been a very clear and explicit focus from the outset to coordinate this plan with the existing and expected land use planning context, and recognizing that this is a plan that needs to work in an urban growth center. This is a plan that needs to operate within an MTSA. Therefore, there are a range of objectives, some of which I touched on, and even the way the policies have been shaped to take an approach that recognizes that conservation is important, but there is a flexibility and an invitation for change done well here. So the plan threads that throughout in terms of the types of policies that are there, as well as the objectives, which is what staff and ultimately council will use to make decisions moving forward as applications come forward.
Mary Jan.
Thank you. I think it's more, for me, what's not in here. In the first iteration, I attended every single meeting, and the public was loud and clear about the fact of Cambridge Street being missing from this study, this district. That's the street that comes into the back of this, but it's an entrance to our campus, which is filled, every single property there is filled with heritage buildings. The public clearly said that. The head of the architectural school clearly was in opposition to the original boundaries because, again, they missed Cambridge Street. And when I look at this, when it came back to council, we were saying to expand the boundaries. And we didn't say just do this. But here, when I read this, it says that city staff, just let me find it. In 2025, city staff directed the study of 2 additional areas, but that was excluded. So who made the decision to exclude Cambridge Street again? Because every one of those is a heritage property. We run the risk of those being torn down. So if we think heritage is important, and recently I hosted, it was my turn to host, the Auto Mayors Caucus. I had a lineup of people at the end, city mayors from across the province, CAOs, and members of auto suppliers lined up to tell me how amazing our city was, how important the heritage was. What we had preserved was different than had been done in their city, and that we were very, very lucky to have it. How did Cambridge Street get missed again? I mean, you added streets that aren't as important as Cambridge Street entering our city campus here, or that don't have buildings of such wonderful architecture with such preservation. It just seems to me there's got to be a reason why it's being avoided.
So I think I can speak to the technical work that the consultant team has done with respect to analysis of Cambridge Street, and it's a conversation that we've had many times in various public forums. The other question that was raised about direction from staff, I think I'll invite staff to respond to that question. So I've been the consultant project manager on the study and plan phase of the project since 2021, so I've been at every public meeting, and I know we have been in Zoom rooms together and around tables together, and the question has come up about the the boundary and the exclusion of Cambridge Street. And the technical analysis and response that I provided then is the same one that I provide today. I think that Cambridge Street is a rich area. There is important fabric there. The study, in fact, the report recommended that the city look at that as its own district. From my experience doing districts in a number of places, at the end of the day, I need to be able to rationalize the boundary based on research, analysis, and interconnectedness of parts. So I've always said Cambridge Street is an important area, but it is a different place than the downtown. It is not the same story. It is not contributing in the same way. There is a distinct change in character. So I'm not trying to split hairs, but there is a difference, and it has always been my professional opinion that the inclusion of that part within this boundary does not fit with the analysis that has been done about what is significant in the downtown. And that has been where I have come from this. We have heard about the inclusion of that area. We also heard about the inclusion of areas on the other side of the river. There have been many various areas beyond this boundary that members of the public have said should be in, and they are important heritage places. My role as a heritage professional is to provide my best opinion about the boundary that makes sense based on what is there and the significance of the interrelationships between them. The other question, I don't know if now's the right time to invite staff to respond to the chronology of events.
Good evening, through the chair. With respect to the areas adjacent to the boundary that's recommended as part of this draft plan, the direction in our work plan is to look at those areas through our Heritage Register review. We understand that our register does have a number of properties adjacent to the recommended boundary that are significant heritage resources, and our intent is to bring those forward through Part 4 designations in the immediate term. Through our Heritage Register project, our review project, we are looking at other areas that may warrant district designation, and those would come forward as part of a recommendation to council as to where we should be studying further districts.
Nick? Follow up, please.
You may, yep.
So it doesn't make sense to me that you would do these individually into Part 4 when we have an opportunity to make this a heritage district. So when I look at how this was extended to include Galt Arena, which is not part of the downtown core, but is part of the fabric of the area, I still struggle with this. This is the entrance, and we all know heritage landscapes evolve through history. They become part of the fabric. That is the entrance to our City Hall campus. It's part of our city as we come in to do business or do political things here. So I'm not getting what you're saying. It's not making sense to me. Please, make sense to me.
Through the chair, we can take that back as a comment to further analyze as we're bringing forward a final report.
Thank you for that. Did you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good.
You good?
Well, I'm not good, but yeah.
Okay, Councillor Roberts?
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and through you, and thank you for your presentation. I just have a question as we are working towards work around the LRT, and that the LRT station would be situated within this proposed HCD district. What implications might there be of the adoption of the HCD on the work being done on the LRT? Would it stop the LRT, or how would that impact the LRT?
So the front end of the plan presents a very detailed discussion of the applicable policy context, and the LRT and the major transit station area is a piece that's reviewed and acknowledged as happening. and part of the area's future around which the plan has been shaped. So there, I don't think is any expectation that the plan presents a conflict or challenge to the LRT. And again, going back to the objectives, which sort of lay the fundamentals, recognize that kind of change is coming, and the plan supports that. So I wouldn't expect any conflict between the two.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and through you. And thank you very much for your delegation and your report. I have a few questions, but I'll ask one and then I'll jump back in the queue. The first one would have to do with intensification or densification in the downtown core for residents to allow more residents that actually live there. I think we frequently see an HCD as, let's say, almost like a tourist attraction, as something that's going to boost business. But that means an influx of people during kind of tourist hours, and then they leave. And then there's not as many people there. And I think we had a delegation, Bob, who came and spoke very eloquently about living in the downtown core, but history shows that our core was very successful only because people lived there and people worked there. And now with the pressures we're seeing, the sprawl we're seeing to move citizens outwards and away from the core, if we really want to revitalize it, if we do need that density to bring people back in the core again, how does that mix with an HCD that tries to, we could say, maintain current heights, if those heights are set for a different era with different understandings of density in urban areas like this?
Sure, I think I can tackle part of the question, but I think there's a broader sort of land use planning exercise that follows on the heels of it, which I think staff can probably speak to in a little bit more detail. So the comments that you just shared were, I think, a very common recurring theme at many of the engagement sessions, which were largely with people who either live here or work here or, have some current relationship with the downtown, that, they really love the fabric and the pace of things. There is some trepidation about change, but ultimately recognition that when an individual said this at a meeting, that what he misses from 20, 30 years ago, or pictures from the downtown from many decades ago, was you're missing people. There are lots of people in those pictures. And today, that is the one thing that is sort of starkly different, and a real, I think, recognition that is a very important part of the downtown's future. And again, going back to the way the policies and guidelines have been crafted with respect to the level of direction and the range of objectives that center those policies and provide the direction to how you interpret them, certainly welcome the kinds of interventions that would bring in density and intensification, in and around what I've described as contributing buildings, or even, as part of or on top of contributing buildings themselves. With respect to sort of coordination of any secondary planning or zoning bylaw work, can I invite a member of staff to speak to how that gels with the work that's been done?
Through the chair, yes, so the study of downtown will be a layered effect. So we're starting with the Heritage Conservation District, and that will provide input for us into an official plan review for the downtown, looking at it as a strategic growth area and a major transit station area, with the density target that we are required to meet by the province. So we will be looking at all those factors, including the fact that there's a floodplain within the downtown, and determining how we can meet the density target. The heritage aspect on its own would not be a detrimental factor to that.
Thank you.
Councillor Swery.
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and my question is going to pivot, so thanks for your presentation. I'm just curious, so if somebody owns an old house in what now you've determined a heritage district, and you sent them letters, but they don't want to be part of it, maybe they're seniors, and it's very costly to now repair because they have to follow all these rules. What happens? Do they have are they able to opt out? Or are they forced, and the force with the potential cost? Because some of these old buildings are, then they can't sell it because there's a lot of structural issues. How do you help them with that?
Sure, through the chair. So the Ontario Heritage Act outlines a process for when a municipality is bringing forward a district. There's a process for anyone to appeal that district. They need to officially submit an objection and an appeal, and that would be the process through the Ontario Land Tribunal that an individual would follow as an appeal, and that can have various outcomes. The district might not ever be put in force, and that's one way that an individual opts out. The district never comes to pass. Sometimes the district is modified as a result of the appeal process, and modifications can mean a whole range of different things. So that's the process an individual would use if they are objecting to inclusion within the boundary. To the question and concern about sort of regulation of changes. So the district is really focused on the most significant kinds of changes that could really change the look, feel, and character of the downtown. So I often go to meetings for districts and people are concerned that, you know, they're going to have to ask permission to do any single thing to the outside of their house, or, you know, the color of their door is going to be, you know, a certain paint color that they have to choose. That's not what this plan is introducing or setting up. It's identified a whole slew of things that don't require any permits. It's business as usual. If you're generally keeping the building as it looks today, that's a minor permit, very similar to, you know, building permits that you would probably already be required to seek. And then if you're doing something like tearing down a building or building a new building, and I don't think that's really the kinds of interventions you're contemplating across the type of owner we're speaking about, that's when, you know, a substantial permitting process would occur. So I think that's an important piece of understanding what this means and what it doesn't mean, which is it does not mean regulation of small minor things.
Thank you, but it would be very costly for someone to fight it, I'm assuming.
As part of an appeal? I can't speak to the costs of what would be involved. It depends on what kind of strategy a property owner takes in terms of their representation or not.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kempson.
Thank you very much, Chair Ahmed, and through you, thank you very much for your presentation. What is the status of the height study, and how does that work its way into this, for this particular area?
Thank you for the question. You want to take that?
Through the chair, the Galt Heights study, there is a recommended plan put forward. It has not been approved by council. It will be revisited as we move forward with our official plan review. This Heritage Conservation District Plan and Guidelines provides recommendations around what heights would be appropriate within the Heritage Conservation District and how to consider changes to heights within certain areas of the district. So those things will be considered as we're moving forward with official plan updates and new policies.
If I may follow up? Thank you. So if we're looking at sort of all these different components that come into play, that's something as well that we'll be looking at when we're looking at how we're going to be achieving the desired or the required density for an MTSA and some of these other areas, and that all works like a web together.
Yes, through the chair, yes, that is true. And the other determining factor in the downtown with respect to heights is the special policy area, the floodplain areas, and what permissions we could do within that. That covers quite a substantial area of our downtown, everything east of Ainsley Street.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Yes, thank you, Chair Mehta. Thanks for your presentation. I know a lot of work went into this. I do have two questions. I hope I can get them out. First main one is with reference to parts that were left out. You did kind of touch on some of the spots that people thought would be included. I'm referring right now to my question to the west side of the river, because that's been completely cut out. And I believe in, can you hear me?
I just didn't catch the name of
West
the,
side of the river.
oh, okay.
Now, we've got Grand Ave itself. I mean, there's numerous buildings there over at Queen Square. I know we've got one that's above the cafeteria there that I believe is not one of, may actually be the oldest building in the region. I'm just wondering why these are not included over here, especially when you did briefly mention early on when you were talking to Mayor Liggett, you actually stated these places over here are important heritage places. So I feel like there's an entire side of the river there that's been left out. I'm sure you're probably prepared for this one.
Through the chair, it's a conversation that's been happening as part of this project. So in 2021, when we completed the study phase, and that's sort of the phase around which you do all of the research and survey of buildings and streets, the recommendation that the consulting team brought forward was to consider a boundary that included the west side of the river and many of the buildings that you mentioned. Council received that recommendation, and a decision was made by council to not include that in the boundary moving forward and instead focus on the east side of the river. So the study phase, which should be accessible on the project website, shows that chronology and recommendations to really understand downtown Galt. It's just not the east side of the river that has been important, but both sides of the river. But a decision was made at that time to not move on to that side, and there were a range of reasons that fed into that decision, which staff can maybe reflect on and share further.
I would love to hear those reasons. I actually spend a lot of time over there. A huge amount of people go over there, especially with the pedestrian bridge, the Gaslight District. I'm just very surprised to see that missing there. If you don't mind, can I do my second question? It's a quick one. Just with regards to what the people actually want here, with regards to the Heritage District and also development. You've talked, I imagine I saw a list of the different consultations you've had with the public. So I've got a question for you. Which do you feel, based on those consultations, that the public valued more with regard to this? Is it the preservation of our key core buildings, the preservation of what we know as, beautiful, charming Galt, or were they more interested in encouraging development?
We didn't measure that question specifically. I think I can characterize, though, the engagements as covering and emphasizing a range of features within the downtown, some of which you touched on, some other aspects that go beyond buildings or other types of sites or kind of events that happen in the downtown and sort of, the sense of community that occurs there. So things you can touch, but also things that you can't touch. In the downtown, as I said to Councillor Hamilton's question, though, even those people that were sharing those comments about all of the things that are valued in terms of historic fabric and areas along the river and the scenery, was also, though, a sense that, wow, wouldn't this be great if it were livelier and denser and there was more intensity of people or programming and in the downtown, recognizing that it's not easy to figure out how to do that well, but recognizing that that's an important way for this entire place to continue to thrive. So it was both of those things coming together.
Very diplomatic answer.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Ahmed, and through you. This question would have to do with allowing different or varying styles of architecture. We don't detect color or shape, we actually detect contrast. And one of my concerns would be if an HCD would actually limit styles and forms of architecture that future generations would find beneficial. So if we look at, for example, Main Street of Galt, from today's perspective, it's like a bunch of beautiful old buildings. But hypothetically, if an HCD would have been put in place 200 years ago, Main Street Galt might not exist as it does today, because those styles are different eras, different shapes, heights, forms, materials, designs. And so with an HCD in downtown Galt, I know the intention is to maintain the architectural and the aesthetic standards that have been set up throughout past decades and even centuries. But we can never go back. We can't recreate those styles. We just don't have the materials. We don't have the masonry techniques, the tools, or the techniques anymore. So how does difference factor into this? Because one of my concerns with an HCD is that we would miss out on those novel new forms of architecture that define our era. They could be very beneficial to future generations of the core if in their place we're putting in today's impression of a bygone era.
Yep. Through the chair, that's an excellent question, and the plan has been very intentional in its policy writing and guidelines to include language like, do not replicate historical styles in new buildings. Do not, we don't use the language Disney-fy, but it's, you know, explained to avoid that kind of recreation of things that are not of this time and place. Policies also explicitly emphasize that contemporary design done well can be a really excellent addition, so long as it responds to the context. And, you know, that context can be the historic building beside it or the street wall across from it, you know, recognizing that it's different across, you know, each property you're within. So it, I think, really sets the direction to embrace change, embrace new design, in a way, though, that's anchored by what is there. And that's why, you know, having a good policy framework for conserving like the existing stock is what makes the introduction of, you know, contemporary buildings work really well and be really rich. So it's a fundamental part of the plan.
Thank you. I like the word Disney-fy. And I have one final question, Chairman, if I may. It's just a quick one. I was just curious, while looking at the expanded boundaries, for example, I know the HCD seems to go up from kind of Main and Wellington all the way up to encompass the park, you know, the top of the hill of Main Street. Why is 150 Main Street included in that? Because that's a large kind of regional office building, and it's a large regional parking lot.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, maybe there's a reason there's some historical value, because I thought that would be out and viable to develop that with that proximity to the core.
Through the chair, so the property, I believe, that's being referenced here is included in the boundary, but it is not considered a contributing property. So it's gray on that map. So it's a property that's been recognized as not being expressive of the heritage character. So the way boundaries work in these kinds of districts is they follow streets and all of the properties along the street. So you don't have this kind of like, well, that property's not important, but the other two properties beside it are, so you cut that property out. You pick up all of the properties that are within the area that has been defined as containing, you know, I refer to it as the secret sauce of the place. Like, it's got all of the core features that make this place what it is, recognizing that within that, beside that, there might be like a relatively unimportant piece, and that gets included, but it's included as non-contributing. So it has a certain policy framework that's geared towards redevelopment. It's not, there's no expectation that that building is important or that it would be conserved. Does that help clarify?
I'll have to ask again afterwards, because even looking at the map, like 150 is included, but all the properties around it are jigsawed out.
Okay.
It doesn't follow the street line. It actually excludes 4 properties beside 150, then goes back to the street, and then cuts back over. So I'm just wondering if there's some special property about 150, or if there's another reason why that.
I would need to look into that further.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We can provide that information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kempson.
Thank you very much, Chair Ahmeda, and through you. For the upcoming public open house on December the 8th, will there be an opportunity to review the work that has been done thus far for anyone attending? Just recognizing that there's been quite a gap in the process per se, during COVID times and then being paused, and now here we are, we've sort of picked it up, and I'm thinking there's probably been a number of people who have come and gone who hopefully would come out to the open house and have the opportunity to learn about what has been done so far and why. So I'm not sure if that's something that can be worked into what's happening, but I think it would be really helpful sort of as a refresh, if you will.
Through the chair, we're still working on the format, so thank you for the feedback. We'll take that back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have 2 questions, and I appreciate all that you've done. One of my questions is, so you've mentioned that there's different heritage districts across the province, and they might have different policies and stuff. Is there one district in particular that kind of fits the vision of what you're trying to do here in Galt? I know every community is different, and you might be looking at taking stuff out of a number of different districts, but is there, just to visualize what you think might work, can you name a district that is experiencing high growth and might have some of the character techniques that we have in Cambridge here at Galt?
That's a very good question. Every district is so customized to the particular place, what has been heard through engagement, the applicable land use planning policy context. So I tend to look at these things around, what kinds of districts are similar in terms of the types of resources that they have, and that's where I try to find some comparators. So I look to communities where you have like the historic core of where it all began. They've got like the first market, the town hall, all of the civic and industrial infrastructure. St. Lawrence Market in downtown Toronto, it's a very different place, but that is a sort of, in Toronto, that's similar to Galt. That's where it all began. And there was a blend of civic, institutional, industrial development that has continued to be anchored, and it's a place where people want to live, and it has a lot of assets. That plan is different. It has a different land use planning policy context, but that's how we approach these things in terms of looking at some precedents and some benchmarks of what are sort of similar types of hubs in terms of like their historical trajectory, and we try to build on those precedents if they make sense to.
Thank you for that answer. And my second question has to do with the boundaries on the east side of the river, on the east side of Water Street. I know that like there's some historical properties there, like the old Opera House. There's the old CMC building further down that's made into lofts. And there may be other properties that are non-contributing, but they do serve as a gateway into the Galt core, and a better quality design would be beneficial to the city. Has that been looked at, like on the east side of Water Street? Because those properties would be visible from the river, right? And as people walk along the river and stuff, so I'm just thinking about having, good appearance and quality projects there too.
Through the chair, I would need to study a map to make sure we're focused on precisely the same area that you're referencing. But back when the study started, the initial area that we looked at went all the way down to Concession Street. So it includes probably the area that you're referring to, is my guess. And the analysis that we went through during the study phase was that southern area didn't have enough retention of fabric that would be able to rationalize its inclusion within the boundary. And that's where I always come to. when I provide my professional opinion on these matters. Can I defend this boundary under appeal at the Ontario Land Tribunal? And there are certain criteria that need to be considered, and it's not only things like, does this area have a range of historical buildings? That's not the test that needs to be met. The test is an interconnection of parts that together are significant as a relationship. So I take the point that that's an important gateway. It would really benefit from a high design standard, but from a, guts on the ground, bricks on the ground features, there wasn't enough material there to rationalize inclusion.
Thank you, and probably just a general comment, then we'll have to be mindful of future secondary plans and that. So thank you very much for answering our questions, that's great. We have a mover for the motion. Councillor Earnshaw.
Yes, thank you, Chair Armetta. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Kimson. Report 25-026-PG, Galt Core Heritage Conservation District Plan and Guidelines be received.
Thank you for that. Does council have any questions of staff? This is your opportunity for that. I think, yeah, Councillor Cooper.
Yes, is this, I'm not much about this process here. If we've got issues with, say, the boundaries, anything like that, I mean, do we have the ability at some point to, send this back for revision if we want?
So you do have an opportunity to provide feedback, and we can take direction to staff if you'd like to do that. I could do questions, feedback, direction all at once if that would work better. If you have any comments, you can make them.
I'm concerned about the boundary, basically. Some places being missed, and definitely the west side of the river just seems to have been thrown to the wolves. I'm concerned about that. I'm just, do we have to speak now to that, make directions, or does this come back, or is this it?
We can take that as direction if council is supportive. And I know Mayor Jan wants to speak as well, so we can.
Yeah, I want to second that. I'm really concerned with the boundaries that are here, and I'm not hearing the words that make me comfortable with these boundaries at this point in time, in particular Cambridge Street. And I don't see any quick action to preserve the west side of the river here either, as Councillor Cooper is saying. I mean, I know that it was part of the Dixon Hill, but that was just the streetscapes. That was just the city properties. That was just the streetlights, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of buildings over there that need to be protected. So I'm just not, it's what I'm not hearing here tonight that is really concerning to me. So that's a takeaway that I would like to see happen.
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in, because I've still got the mic going here, but yeah, I have to agree. I'm not hearing adequate justification for why what I see as some majorly critical areas of downtown, what I consider part of the core, are being left out.
Thank you. We will take that as direction. I'm sorry, Mr. Bromberg.
If I can just ask Melissa to come up and maybe respond to that, please.
Good evening. Through the chair, in terms of the process for an HCD, at the study phase, council provided their approval of the boundary, and with that approval of the boundary, direction to move into the plan phase. So if we were looking at going back to the study phase to reconsider a boundary, we would need a formal council resolution to do so. In terms of the question of west of the river, we also have the Dixon Hill HCD, so the boundaries of two HCDs generally cannot overlap. So we would need to reconsider and reopen the Dixon Hill HCD to reconsider its policies and guidelines.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kimson.
Thank you very much, Chair Ameta, and through you. I guess I'm wondering, given the concerns that have been raised by Councillor Cooper and Mayor Leggett, if there's an opportunity to have some further discussion about this. I don't know if it needs to be a formal direction, or if if the opportunity for this discussion, as far as making a timeline, is there time to do this, or how might that work? If you could maybe elaborate on what some options might be, please.
Through the chair, I believe the clerk is going to address that.
Okay. Did you? Yeah, I'll let Mayor Jan speak.
I want to amend this motion to refer it back to staff versus receive the document as is, so that all of those items can be addressed. When that came before council last time, we didn't fine-tune those boundaries. We left it open to the greater area. That was the understanding around this council table, but I'm concerned when I see it says staff directed. I have concerns with that. That should be a council decision on those boundaries. So, yeah.
So thank you, Mayor Jan. We are going to call a recess just to get the right wording. We will be
I have a
back.
second. I have a seconder for my
Okay.
amendment to
Who is the seconder?
Councillor Kimpson.
Councillor Kempson, very good. We're going to work out the wording. The
Okay,
clerks
thank you.
want to meet in that. Let's say 5 minutes. Okay. Back, everyone. And thank you for your patience as we get this sorted out. I'm going to get clerks to read the deferral motion that we've got.
This is moved by Mayor Liggett, seconded by Councillor Kimson, that report 2526 PG, Galt Core Heritage Conservation District Plan and Guidelines be deferred to permit additional refinement of the district boundaries based on the feedback provided by Council at the statutory public meeting of November 25th, 2025.
And thank you for that. Are there any comments, members of council? Time and place only. Otherwise, we'll call the vote. Oh, wait, sorry, Councillor Swery, and that's just time and place.
Thank you. I was just wondering, by deferring it and changing the boundary, is the consultant able to support it at the OLT? What is?
Thank you. It's just time and place. We can get information later, but right now it's just time and place. Okay, so we'll call the vote.
Opening voting. Closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
And thank you. So this public meeting is now closed. And we've got our next item. So I'm just looking here for it. Oh, sorry, back one page. Okay. Our last statutory public meeting is agenda number 5.2, 25-006, CFS Parks and Recreation Development Charges, Update Study and Bylaw. We do have a presentation from Watson and Associates. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you to the chair, thank you to the mayor and council for having me here this evening to speak on this matter. So what we're here to talk about is the public meeting for the Parks and Recreation Development Charge Background Study update. So the public meeting is a requirement under the Development Charges Act. It's a statutory public meeting so that we can hear feedback from the public, answer questions of council in relation to the background study that we must put on the website. And so we completed a background study, put that on the website November 11th. As part of the public process, we have this public meeting, and then council can consider the bylaw only after 60 days after the study's been posted to the website. So theoretically, this could be passed as early as January 11th. However, that date has yet to be determined. And so this will come forward, the bylaw will come forward at a future council date after January 11th for council's consideration. So I know we went through the development charge background study process in 2023 and 2024, but just as a refresher, and for those in the public that might be listening, development charges are a revenue tool used by municipalities to recover the capital costs associated with new development. And so you have new residential, new non-residential development coming to the city. Because of that development, we need to invest in infrastructure. In this case, we're talking about building parks and recreation services to accommodate that new development. Development charges are in addition to what a developer would normally pay for to construct as part of their subdivision. You can think inside that typical subdivision, you have the internal roads, water mains, sewer mains. They would provide that as a local service at their own cost. Development charges are in addition, the infrastructure to connect the developments to each other and to the broader network. And so we're empowered to impose these charges under the Development Charges Act. The Development Charges Act guides the way in which we calculate the charge, the way in which we prepare the bylaw, and the implementation of the bylaw and charges. So at a high level, development charges are calculated by taking the net growth-related costs and dividing it by the growth to come up with our charge. And we'll get a development charge per unit for residential growth, and we'll get a development charge per square meter or per square foot for non-residential growth. The way in which we calculate that numerator, the costs associated with new development and growth, is we take the total capital costs, we look at the various projects, and we need to make a series of deductions. So if there's any share of those projects that benefit the existing community, for example, if we're going to replace something, we need to make a deduction. If we're going to receive grants, subsidies, or other contributions, we also need to make a deduction for that. And so what we're left with is the costs directly associated with the new development. And so as part of the full DC background study process that occurred in 2023, 2024, there was separate bylaws passed for each service, and this was in response to some of the legislative changes that were happening at the time. So there is a specific bylaw for each development charge service and one bylaw specifically for parks and recreation services. As part of that work, we did have a growth forecast which identified about 23,500 people over the 10-year period, about 9,600 units, and just under 8.2 million square feet of non-residential floor space that would be added over the 10-year period. We haven't changed this forecast because we're doing an update. We're utilizing the same growth forecast information from the 2024 study. So the current development charges rates in force after the 2024 study was completed. The charges are indexed every year as per the bylaw based on Statistics Canada non-residential building construction price index. And so the current rates we see today, if you have a fully serviced unit with water and wastewater, single and semi-detached units, it's $40,857. Other multiples are things like townhomes or row houses, $27,321. Apartments, we stratify those between larger apartments, 2+ bedrooms, are $23,235, and apartments that are smaller, 1 bedroom or bachelor or studio apartments, they pay a lower charge, $12,619. Special care, special dwelling units relate to things like adult living centers or retirement homes, and their charges are based on a per unit, $11,763. On the non-residential side, we look at the gross floor area, and the charges are applied based on the gross floor area. So if you like to use per square foot, it's $9.09 per square foot. If you are a metric person, it's $97.89 per square meter. If we just did the study back in 2023 and 2024, why am I before you today? So as we were completing the 2024 background study, there was an ongoing Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was just starting off. And that Parks and Recreation Master Plan has now been completed and has been adopted. And as part of that, it's identified new capital costs and updated capital costs, which we then have used to update the calculation of the development charge for the purposes of this work. In addition, there's been some recent legislative changes. I'll summarize those quickly for you. And so the bylaws can be amended to align with the new legislative changes. And so Bill 17 has been passed and implemented. And so what it did is it brought in a new exemption for long-term care homes. It refined the definition of capital costs under the Development Charges Act. And we'll talk a little bit about how this has been implemented with the most recent changes of Bill 60. It provided this simplified bylaw amendment process. So if you're going to repeal or change the DC bylaw expiry date to align with the new 10-year provisions, you can do that. If you're going to repeal the indexing provision, or you're going to decrease the development charge for one or more types of development, you can go through an expedited process. You don't need to have a public meeting. You don't need a background report. You just need to bring forward the amended bylaw and provide notice. And with that, there's no appeal to the OLT for those expedited processes. With respect to a deferral to occupancy, this came into effect November 3rd, and so now all residential development that isn't rental housing has the option to pay their development charge at occupancy. So if they want to pay at occupancy, they're required to get an occupancy permit, depending on the process that's been established, and then they can pay their charge at occupancy. If they want to pay it earlier, they can. So they could pay at building permit if they choose. With respect to the installment payments, so certain types of development, rental housing and institutional development, they pay their development charge in 6 equal installments. Previously, we could charge interest on those installments. Now we can't. So any interest that was accrued up to November 3rd can be charged. After that, no more interest can accrue on those installment payments. And then lastly, if residential development doesn't want to pay at occupancy, they'd rather pay at permit like usual, they can. Or if rental housing or institutional development doesn't want to pay the installments, they can also pay at the time of building permit without the need for an agreement. Certain types of development that proceed through site plan and zoning bylaw amendments, their rate is frozen at the time they submit their application. The city will go through and approve the application. Once the application is approved, they then have 18 months to pull their building permits, and they get to use that frozen rate. The new legislative change says, we'll take a look at what that frozen rate is, compare it to the current rate, and whatever rate is lower is the rate that we're going to impose. Lastly, the legislative changes under Bill 17 brought in the ability for grouping of services for the purposes of credits. So if I'm a developer and I build a water main that's part of the DC capital listing, and it's $1 million, I get a credit of $1 million related to that water main. If we group services, then I can use that credit to not only pay down my water DC, but I can use it for other services such as my wastewater DC. So the most recent legislative changes come through Bill 60. And Bill 60 has had the 3rd reading in the House, and that vote has passed. And so now it's just awaiting royal assent, which I would guess is probably coming sometime this week. And so we prepared for this. We actually, because we knew the legislative change was coming, as we prepared the background study report, we also included an appendix which revised the calculations to align with Bill 60. So if Bill 60 does receive royal assent before Council passes the bylaw, we have met the legislative requirements and the bylaw can proceed as normal. And so one of the big changes here is identifying land acquisition as a class of service. So previously, if we had the cost of land, we could include that in the cost of each respective development charge calculation. Now we have to take the land and put it into its own bucket and recover the cost of land by itself. With that, we used to do we do a historical level of service calculation where we look at the value of your assets over the last 15 years. Previously, we would include land in that valuation. Now we have to remove land from that analysis. And again, we did that analysis in the appendix. Based on the changes to the legislation, it actually doesn't impact the charge that we calculated as part of this process. The merging of credits under Bill 60, so water and wastewater services are merged for the purposes of credits. No impact to this DC study process, but something administration will need to monitor on a go-forward basis. And then with respect to the benefit to existing calculations, so I mentioned we have to identify what share of the projects benefit the existing community. What's required now in the legislation is some more transparency, some more details on how that is calculated. And so again, in the appendix, we actually added a table and showed for every single project how we calculated the benefit to existing and how we came up with the total costs as well. There's additional reporting requirements as part of the annual treasurer's statement. Again, no impact to this DC study process, but something that administration will need to monitor. Those treasurer statements will need to be completed by June 30th of each year, and now they must be submitted to the minister by July 15th. With respect to the local service policy is the policy in your Appendix E to your background study, which sets out what's the developer's cost as a local service, so what do they pay for, versus what goes into the development charge calculation. Our firm's process and approach to local service policies aligns very well with the legislative changes, and so all that's required as part of this study process to align with that is to include in the resolution to approve the study, approve the bylaw, is to also approve that no changes are required to the local service policy. Okay. So with the updated capital costs that are identified in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, what we have as the calculated charge, and this is in to $2023, which is what the initial study was calculated in. So we calculated $14,300 as the Parks and Recreation charge. When we recalculate, that goes up to $19,806 for a single detached home. For the non-residential development, the Parks and Recreation charge will go from 57 cents per square foot up to 79 cents per square foot. And so restating that table that we saw earlier, indexing these charges up to 2025 so we can compare what the current charges are relative to this. You can see now that a single and semi-detached home would pay in the urban area, so full water, wastewater services, $46,627. And you can see the respective charges for the different types of units. And for the non-residential development, it's $9.32 a square foot, or $100.37 per square meter floor area. So how does that compare to some of your comparator municipalities? These are the municipalities we included in the 2024 background study comparison. You'll see generally you're kind of in the upper middle, the middle section of your comparators, noting that, as was mentioned earlier, Hamilton, which is right in between your current charge and your calculated charge, has reduced their charges for a period of 2 years by 20%. Otherwise, this is the general kind of area that your charges are relative to your comparators. When we look at the non-residential side of things and we look at the commercial charges, wouldn't necessarily change your relative position except for the fact that Hamilton did discount their charges. Otherwise, you're kind of on that lower middle end of the spectrum here. And then similarly for the industrial charges, you'll see you're in that kind of same relative position, that lower middle end of the comparators. So with that, that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, members of council? Councilor Schwery?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. Just a question, because it's all about homes, building homes faster, how does increasing the development charges by 14% help that?
So through the chair, increasing the charges doesn't help build homes faster. The intent of development charges are to recover the capital costs associated with the new development. If council chooses to reduce the charges, you're able to reduce the charges that are calculated, but then any reduction in the charges is then funded through other sources, which would be taxes. So property taxes would cover the reduction.
Thank you for the promotion, by the way. We probably should have an election first. But are there any other questions, members of council? I have a question, actually. I noticed with the apartment units, the bachelor units have like lower charges, right? If I'm reading that correctly, and there may be good reasons for that. You know, maybe it puts on less of a strain on services and things like that. However, if we're trying to encourage more family units and all that, would this be discouraging that, do you think? Or because council has asked for larger units in the past, and if they're being charged higher, could it impact that? Thank you.
Yeah, so the way that we calculate the development charge is we take the share of the costs related to residential development, we divide it by the gross population growth, and that gives us a charge per capita. Then to allocate it to the different unit types, we look at Statistics Canada data to determine how many people per unit there are on average. So what that shows me here, without the specific numbers, is if the charge itself is about almost 2 times as much. There's about 2 times as many people in those units relative to the smaller units. So it's all based on the math, the calculation, and because what we have to do when we defend this at the Ontario Land Tribunal is defend that nexus between the new development and the charges and what infrastructure is required to accommodate them. And the way we do that is generally on a population basis. So the population on the residential side is driving the need, and there's less people in those smaller units, then they pay less charge.
And thank you for that, Councillor Swery.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Mehta. Just to clarify, so I think I heard you say the more intensification, the higher the population, the higher development charges, which means higher cost of homes.
Sorry, through the chair. So not necessarily the higher intensification, it's just generally over the population. So it could be in intensification areas, it could be in greenfield areas, especially when we're looking at something like parks and recreation. It's generally planned on the additional population, right? We want to have 7 acres of parkland for every 1,000 people. It doesn't necessarily identify where those people are. It just says, well, we need it for that amount of population.
Yeah, sorry, I used intensification, but I meant intensifying the population.
Okay.
So, okay.
Yeah, and so through the chair, if you have more population, you're going to have more capital needs, right? Especially with something like Parks and Recreation Services that is driven by the amount of population you have. Again, if you have standards that are set out through the master plan that was just approved on how many acres per 1,000 people, or how much arena space you want to have per 10,000 people, et cetera, all of that will increase with the increased population.
Thank you for that. I see no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Does council have any questions? Or, right, we need to put the motion on the floor. Councillor Cooper?
I think I have that somewhere here. Okay, this is moved by me, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that council receives the Parks and Recreation Development Charges Update Study and bylaws as outlined in Report 25-006-CFS. And that staff receive comments from the public and key stakeholders regarding the Parks and Recreation Development Charges Update Study and draft bylaw prior to finalizing the information for council approval. And further, that the corresponding bylaws be brought forward for consideration at the February 3rd, 2026 council meeting.
Thank you. Does council have any further questions for staff? Councillor Kimpson?
Thank you very much, Chair Mehta. Just a question for staff with regard to the recommendation to receive comments from the public and key stakeholders. Until what date? I just want to make sure that it's clear that if people have comments and feedback, that it's provided in enough time for it to be brought forward as part of the February 3rd report and or bylaws.
Yoshina? Oh, sorry, Sheena? Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Kimpson, it is up to council how long you would like to receive that information for. It could technically be open until the actual bylaw adoption, which we're anticipating at the council meeting in February.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Mehta. I guess I'm just wondering, if we want to have that information come forward, how much time is needed by staff to correlate it and have it ready to get back to council so that we have it for any of our consideration if necessary?
Thank you. Again, through the chair to Councillor Kimpson, staff will compile any correspondence received and will bring that forward with a final report when the bylaw is brought forward anticipated in February for approval.
Follow up, yep.
Thank you very much. So would we treat it just the same as we would any correspondence going with the council package or addendum, and it would just be included? Or I guess I'm wondering, does it have to be included in a report, and what date do staff need that information as part of their report?
Sheena or Mr. Bomberg?
Thank you. Again, through the chair to Councillor Kimson, I would have to consult our internal workflow schedule on what date specifically we would need to have that information to be able to include it in the council agenda. But of course, there is opportunity to even include additional information as part of the addendum, right up to that last date.
Mr. Bomberg?
Maybe if I can just clarify in terms of process. Generally, staff require 5 weeks ahead of the council meeting to prepare the report and go through our internal checkoffs in order for it to be made public on time. So 5 weeks, it would be the sort of magic cutoff date to follow the normal report process.
Councillor Swery?
Thank you, Chair Mehta. I just want to say I'm a little bit concerned with this study because there was no consultation with the Home Builders Association, and I think it's very important that they would have. Thank you.
Mayor Jan?
Thank you. So speaking to Councillor Kimson's concern, I think it states in the second part of this that the comments be received in draft bylaw prior to finalizing the information for council approval for February 3rd. So that means it would have to be all completed, all that information and the comments from the public in order to be part of that report. Am I correct, Mr. Bromberg?
Mr. Bromberg?
Thank you. So in order to have the public feedback as part of the normal process for a report, we would have to close the public engagement 5 weeks ahead of the council meeting.
Close the commenting 5 weeks before?
That's correct.
So what is that date? You're saying 5 weeks, but what is that date?
The council meeting is the end of February. I would suggest then that would be the end of January. If you give me a few minutes, we can
No,
calculate.
February 3rd.
February 3rd, there's, maybe if I could just ask for 5 minutes and then I can provide that response.
Thank you.
We'll be back in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to get Mr. Bromberg to make some remarks, and then we'll move to clerks.
Great. Thank you for the brief pause for us to connect with staff. With council's support, what we would propose is that the February 16th date, we would close the public comment period. That also allows staff to meet with the Home Builders Liaison Committee. We do that typically monthly, so hearing some feedback from council, we can certainly connect with the Home Builders Association as well before February the 16th. That would mean that we would tentatively bring back the council report for March 24th, allowing additional time. So, and clerks has the proposed motion that they'll be able to read out. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have the motion read out.
Thank you, Chair Mehta. So if council is interested in this, the wording we have drafted is that council receives the Parks and Recreation Development Charges Update Study and Bylaw as outlined in Report 25006 CFS, and that staff receive comments from the public and key stakeholders regarding the Parks and Recreation Development Charges Update Study and Draft Bylaw prior to finalizing the information for council approval, and that the cutoff date for public comments be February 16th, 2026, and further that the corresponding bylaws be brought forward for consideration with a target date of March 24th, 2026.
Thank you. Is there any comment, members of council? Oh, and the mover and the seconder, are you okay with that? We're good? Okay, we'll call the vote. We're just one last round for further comments before we move on from this. If there isn't, we'll call the vote.
And opening voting. Closing voting. And that carries 8-1.
I now declare this public meeting closed, and we will move on to a motion to receive. Could I have the mover read the motion? Councillor Devine.
Thank you. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Earnshaw, that all presentations and correspondence from the November 25th, 2025 Planning Statutory Public Meeting be received.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments, questions? We'll call the vote.
Opening voting. Closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Thank you. We have now reached the end of our meeting. Could I have the mover read the motion? Councillor Kimpson.
Thank you very much, Chair Mehta. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Roberts. Recommendation that the Planning Statutory Public Meeting Committee does now adjourn at 8 p.m.
Thank you, and probably no comments on that. We'll call the vote.
Opening voting. Closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Well, thank you to everyone for taking the time to contribute your thoughts during our meeting. We would take a 5 to 10 minute break before our council meeting. Thank you.